Welcome to another episode of Groundwork, where we interview the leaders building the most interesting partnerships and ecosystem teams in the world. And I am very excited to have Jim joining me here today, and can't wait to dig into what a amazing experience he's had in the industry. So, Jim, maybe you could start off by telling us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, will do. Thanks for having me here today. My career started in the product world, and I knew I wanted to be more on the front end of a business. And for a while, was in sales. Then ended up in channel sales probably about 15 years ago. Led a channel team, and have done channels and partnerships predominantly in the martech, data, ad tech space since then.
Amazing. Yeah, and an absolutely rich experience. Normally, I hear people coming into partnerships from sales and sometimes from like relationship management, account management, and sometimes from marketing, quite rarely from product, even though partnerships often reports into product. So I'm interested, like, what was it, you're working on the product side. What was it about getting, closer to the front line, as you say, that was appealing to you?
I mean, if I'm being honest, I felt like there was more action. It was faster paced. You were more on the cutting edge of things. I would say sometimes in the product world, you're forced to deliver a product within a specific date, even though from a development perspective, it needs a different time frame. And there were some constraints as far as I looked at it, where in partnerships or sales, it was more of you work harder, you make it what you want it to be. You're more in control of your own destiny, so to speak. So that was what was interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're pleased that you made the change. So one of the things I read recently that 80% of Apple's sales are done through the cell provider, the carriers is the right term, I think. And that just kind of blew my mind, to be honest. I was just like, wow, I would have expected it to be way more in the stores and online, but it's 80% of all of iPhone sales through the carriers. And so, this I worked at American Express for 5 years, and in that corporate business, everything was partnerships. When I look back, we didn't call it partnerships at the time, but like looking back, I'm like, oh wow, everything that we did was with partners. And I wonder if looking back when you were at Verizon, you see something similar now, where you're like, wow, we were doing a lot with partners in different facets of the business, or how did that look?
We did, in the sense it was that role in particular was essentially part product role, part partnerships role. So internally, we were white labeling various components of web hosting and I would say ancillary products. And with Verizon's media division at the time, um, we're white labeling it for them. So you were kind of partner sales more internally. On the back end, it was more OEM, white label. And it was 100%, to your point, like Apple 80%. It was 100% for us, because we knew it was I would say a product that our core product team was not going to go out and try to build or replicate. So, but we knew we needed to have it as part of our overall offering.
That's awesome. Yeah, and so what part of the business did that function report into? Was it like a corp dev business strategy thing, or was it a product thing?
It was a product thing. It was in hindsight, I think partnerships, I'll say in air quotes, has evolved so much in the last 15 to 20 years that you didn't really think of it the way that you do today. I think a lot of those sort of white labels were just the product team took care of it, any sort of OEM. Sometimes it was a little more technical in nature. There's a variety of reasons why, but it just seemed like that was where something like that would typically sit.
Interesting. Yeah, and I've run into uh, product leaders who have like partnerships in the business, and they'll often carry a P&L, especially in more traditional businesses. Some of these people almost act like kind of a GM of a product. Was that like the setup here, or what was the incentive for the product org to be working on a partnership or like an OEM partnership like that?
I would say it was more product metrics, if you will. It wasn't, I mean, every product had a revenue number. This had a revenue component to it. But a lot of times it was, I'll say, if you look from a theater perspective, it was more behind the stage work that we were doing at Verizon. The next role that I had um, was much more of a channel sales role, still working more in the media space with an SEO, SEM reseller. But that was where I was more of a biz dev
Yeah.
GM, my own P&L type of thing. It almost seemed like at the end of the 2000s is where it evolved from that first situation to the second in the industry.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always, and I'm sorry, I'm like picking on a very historic thread, but I almost want to leap from there into like the corporate development experience or like the corporate development responsibility you have now. But I just want to stay on this thread a little bit because it's very interesting to me. So like, would you imagine in Verizon at that time, also like other companies where basically these OEM type partnerships are happening, or like Verizon and Apple and like the people that are doing those deals? Is Do you think that that's like a like in the case of this OEM partnership, it was like someone at on the strategy side had basically said, "Hey, this is a product that we want to bring into the catalog," and then it like comes down to the product team to figure that out? Or like, do you think that idea originates with a product team? I'm interested in your perspective.
I think it's like a multi-phased situation where I think it starts out as I'll oversimplify for a second, just filling a product gap. We're not going to offer product X. It's not going to be on our core product team's roadmap, but we know we need it compared to what our competitors are offering. I think going in the Wayback Machine, I think the product team with strategy would look at specific vendors, would see who they were aligned with or weren't aligned with. If memory serves me right, we would have some sort of scorecard, if you will, on the vendors, and then we would work from the top down to see who was interested in an OEM partnership. Sometimes they were precluded from doing something like that because of some geo restraints or some other sort of partnerships that wouldn't allow them to do that. And then I think once a vendor is selected, we OEM them. And I think that's when, and it may sound backwards, but that's when strategy would more get involved and say, what is this team really like? Are they delivering? Is our product team happy with them? Um, what could be a next step to strengthen the relationship? And it could be everything from we didn't have a formal SKU in the price book to now we do, to I would say more corp dev stuff. Is this somebody that we would want to acquire? And then there's a whole slew of other questions that you would go through to evaluate and vet them.
Amazing. Okay, yeah, super interesting. And so I want to kind of fast forward to today, and like you say, you've got this kind of corp dev responsibility, corporate development responsibility, and so yeah, could you explain to me first how that applies to your current role, and then I'm interested to kind of pick on that thread a little bit more.
Yeah, I think there's so where I am now, I'm at Rainfocus, an event technology platform, and I think from a partnerships and air quotes perspective, there's a number of different types of partnerships. There are event tech agencies and SIs that are very specialized in there. That's one set of partners. There's services partners that we have that if you look at our customer base and you answer the what's in their tech stack question, we want to have services partners that if they have a Salesforce, an Adobe, a Microsoft Dynamics type questions, hey, how can you tie some things together for us? Outside of our own services and our CS team's expertise, you want partners that fill that gap. Going back to my product experience, I am always partial to the ISV, the technology partners, because I like the 1+1 = 3 equation where you've got a better together solution. It's always tangible on day one. From a value prop perspective, from a use case perspective, what pain points are you solving for? It's much more of a black and white, clear message with the technology partners. All the partners are valuable. They all have a piece of the puzzle that they fill. But I would say from a corp dev perspective at Rainfocus, the strategic partnerships that I would say a majority of our clients have in their stack. So again, think of all the usual suspects: Adobe, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Salesforce, Oracle. they all have pieces, whether it's their CRM, their marketing automation platform, CDP, and the like. Those are the ones where I'm trying to build and foster those relationships with, just because it makes the most sense for our customer base as we grow.
Yeah, awesome. And I have this like theory that like corporate development, like whether it, it comes down to like how active a company is in acquiring, right? Like, so that could either be like a really big part of the strategy or a really small part of the strategy. But I do have this theory that the the person who has visibility into the broader ecosystem of partners in the company, you are going to also have good visibility into, you know, who are potential acquisition targets as you're thinking about like that build by partner strategy. Well, if you're going to buy or partner, those two are like quite closely related, where it's like, hey, well, you probably want to buy one of your partners, if you're not already partnering with someone for that solution. And also, like, if it is a strategic decision to build something, like maybe you want a line of sight again to potentially buy that person. And so I feel like the person who's like the leader of partnerships in a business is quite uniquely qualified, maybe not to be the owner of that thing necessarily, but at least be involved in that type of conversation. Like, I would be interested in hearing, like, just initially your gut check on that. What do you think?
Honestly, I'm going to give you three different situations. One of which I'm going through now, two of which I've went through in the past, and I would say now at Rainfocus, we're more focused right now on executing.
Yeah.
Like we had great, tremendous growth in 2023, especially compared to the folks in our industry. I mean, it was just top. We had a killer 23. There's no other way to say it. Um, Part of from a strategic partnerships role is how can I expand what we're doing with the strategic partners from 23 to 24. I don't want to say it's 100% heads down, nose to the grindstone type of thing, but it's a majority of that now with a, hey, good things are going to happen if we continue to execute. The reality of the situation is, if you asked any ISV, this is my opinion, but I think it's true. If you ask any ISV in Oracle or Adobe or Salesforce's technology partner ecosystem, they're all going to raise their hand and say, yeah, we're a great candidate for acquisition. The
Hmm.
reality is there's probably, less than 1/10 of 1% that actually get it that far.
Yeah.
And I think there's a variety of ways to get there. I think, to your point, industry factors have maybe a stronger tell as to what's going to happen. And what's unfortunate is a lot of the industry factors you don't have control over. And it could be company X maybe looking to acquire somebody in the B2C space and you're B2B, so you're not a good fit. Or maybe it's the opposite where, hey, we think we're light on B2B partners. It could be one of the big guys made a large acquisition that regulatory wise never went through. So now their corp dev has a war chest back that they didn't think that they were going to have. A lot of it depends on other industry factors. And again, not naming names, but the big guys that I mentioned a few minutes ago, if one of them feels like somebody else is eating their lunch in a specific area and you happen to have that product that you can fill a gap or otherwise stave them off, where it's not as much of a, one big guy picking at the other big guy's business. And I mean even more so than sales cloud versus marketing cloud versus service cloud type of thing. So there's a lot of industry factors. I can tell you from past experience, was it someone that was acquired by one of those folks where the top two, the co-founders in the company, decided years before that happened that we were going to have a playbook for the top 8 or 10 potential acquirers. We're going to have essentially the CEO and the chief digital officer. They each split them. They each got 4 or 5 that they built relationships with the corp dev folks. You say you're going to do something, then you deliver. Hey, and I'm making this up, but in 2015, we're going to hit 50 million ARR. And then January of 2016 comes around and you were at 55 million. You're always circling back, or a Forrester or Gartner report comes out and look at us, we're way up, up and to the right. Or the movement went from more of the middle to up, and anything like that I would consider now a nurturing campaign. That happened for a few years. And the big benefit to that was we ended up with 4 or 5 of those 10 folks bidding on us. And it
Wow.
went from a 9-figure deal to a 10-figure deal because I think because a lot of that pre-work that was done. There was another situation where there were industry factors around COVID that expedited something. Um, so to me, you can't, you can plan the work, you can work the plan, but a lot of times there's external industry factors that all of a sudden you weren't on somebody's radar and you are. I think all you can do is from a preparation perspective and a planning perspective. What needs to be done to maximize your chances, but you don't. I mean, as a small ISV, you don't control any of that, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's really, really interesting. And so given that these big players, like you talked about, like it sounds like at least the company that you were at, the founders had kind of taken that upon themselves. It also sounds like, if that could be somewhat of a role that the partner leader could also support with, in the sense that, hey, like if you're partnering with Salesforce and you're making sure that Salesforce is hearing all of that good stuff, and you're bringing in the exec sponsors, and you're keeping them up to date on all of the like strategic stuff. And so I really liked the call out that you made there around like strategic partnerships and like potential future acquirers, even if the company's not trying to sell in that current moment. And so like, yeah, those sound like very strategic partnerships, and I do feel like there's strategic partnerships, and then there's like scaled partner programs, and it's like two very different motions. Like, given that some people who are listening to this right now might have never worked on strategic partnerships, could you just talk a little bit about like strategic partnerships and what that means to you, and like maybe even an example that you've worked on?
Yeah, so I'll give you technology partner examples because I've got many more of them than the other. And two, again, I think the tangible benefits are easier to explain. There's less of a gray area, versus maybe some other OEM distribution services agency type partnerships. Um, one big plug for PL, and this is something that working with Chris over the years off and on would be a great, I think, breakout session for the event in August, is how to work through some of these uh, bigger technology partnerships. Um, I have some experience more in the market in some of the marketplaces, but much more in the big technology partnerships. And a lot of times, when you're going to, let's say, you're at square one with a strategic partnership with a technology partner, one of the big players I mentioned. A lot of times, you start with what I call a partner recruitment team. They're biz dev. They're going to vet you. Are you real? Is there a better together story? Is there any sort of Venn diagram overlap with anything that's in big companies product suite? Which I've been on both sides of that, where there's been none. I've had it where there's been some, where maybe a big company's trying to sunset a product or no longer invest in it from a product perspective. And you may think that that's a bad thing. They may look at you as being very appealing because you don't know that they're going to sunset the product. But getting back to your question, you start in partner recruitment, you go through, you negotiate the terms. And again, everyone is different. Some are paid to play. You pay this amount, you're going to be this level partner. You get this level access inside to sales, product, technical folks, marketing folks. You get some sort of marketing fund, joint marketing funds budget. There's all sorts of things that if it's pay to play, that a lot of what your partner program fee is going to go towards. So that could branch out into a lot of different things around go to market um, with that. Once you get that signed, well, I mean, before we do that, When you get into some of the other programs, some it's you're just paying a fee and essentially you're like a listing in an online directory. You don't pay much of a fee, you don't get much. There are others where it's rev share, where they vet you, but they vet you more from your ability to, hey, can we resell this app? Will joint customers want to buy this? And if so, we're going to do our finger in the wind for year one to see what we think it's going to be, because they have tiers of partner managers or partner sales folks at the big companies that, depending on how much potential, where you play, do you play up market? Are you basically trophy hunting, way up market? Is this something that everybody's going to need, but it's going to be an inexpensive app, but you're going to sell 10,000 of them to the customer base? A lot of that goes, as part of that partner recruitment process, you go through that. And for me, there are I'll say certain ones of the big guys that I know a lot better than the others. But with respect to ones that have rev share, you get on those teams, and I think the go to markets, once you get to that point, a lot of what they're asking you to do is pretty similar. You need the power card, you need a lot of the go to market materials, you need the 2 to 3 minute video. What does it mean for big companies sales reps? Like, what's the better together story? Why should they pay attention to you versus the thousands of other ISVs that are out there? All those sorts of go to market materials. I think you can impress them with your platform. Like, how are your APIs? Like, do you have a good tech team to build the integration? Is big company holding small company ISV's hand to build this? Is a small company doing it on the, all on their own because they've got all the expertise? Again, literally, there's hundreds of variables that you would go through. But I think if, and to take like maybe 2 or 3 steps back, all of that is much easier for somebody running partnerships if there's either a partnership DNA within the company that you're at, or that recognition of something that we need to have. There's always going to be a little bit of indirect, direct channel friction. And I would say if it's a little, that's pretty healthy. But if it's more than that, and I'll give you another example of, you want to do a strategic partnership with big company X, but you're fighting with the CRO because you don't report to the CRO for the same product and dev resources. So you need to get an integration done. You need to promise big company X it's going to be done by the end of Q2. And then something happens from the direct sales side that, if you're not aligned, could potentially undercut you. And basically, it'll be a black eye for you before you even launch the partnership. So again, everything I've just said, I've gone through. I've stepped on all those landmines. Um, so I speak from experience. So I feel like now I can see the landmines before I get to them. And, even if I go from one company to another, there's a lot more questions that I ask now of, if somebody wants me to come in and run strategic partnerships, than I would
Yeah.
have asked 3, 5, 7 years ago.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And so I had a question for you on strategic partnerships. So yeah, like let's say someone hires you in to run strategic partnerships or partnerships in general, but most often it's like, hey, we need these strategic partnerships, right? And that's why they're hiring in someone to run that. And when you make a bet on a strategic partnership, you're taking a fairly big swing, both reputationally within the business and like also career security wise in general, right? It's like, hey, number one, often these things take quite a lot of time to like build those initial relationships and prove value, and like all of the things that you even need to get to be able to like see revenue coming back. And so it takes a lot of time. Also, hey, like priorities in the business can change a bunch, and maybe the business decides that's no longer strategic anymore. Number of reasons why they can be like quite risky career moves when you join a company and work on a strategic partnership. So could you tell me like how you think about when you're asking these types of questions, like how are you thinking about qualifying, hey, is this really a partnership that I want to bet my job on potentially, or like a selection of partnerships that I want to bet my job on here, or like and I'm good with that, or like, hey, do we need to do this in a lighter weight version so that we can figure things out, even if the CEO is asking for them?
Oh gosh, I could answer that 15 different ways. Um, a lot of it starts with kind of the sixth sense that I have with the CEO and or the founders. Is it folks that I think I can work with? Do I think they have partner DNA? Do I think that they have the situational awareness that they know that they don't have the partnership DNA, but they know that you do, and they're going to embrace that and not fight it? Obviously, are they financially solvent? Are they 6 months away from having to get that next round? What does the team look like? Who would I report to? Do I inherit a team? Am I supposed to build one out? To your comment earlier, if I tell them it's going to take 18 to 24 months to show you any real value in XYZ partnership, do they believe me? Am I going to get that runway? And then I try to back channel with anybody that I know in the industry from a network perspective. What do you know about them? Such and such seems like a good guy. Am I missing something? A lot of things that I would look at. If I inherit a team, is that going to grow? Do I have a chance of bringing new people in if I feel like I don't have a team full of A players? All of that comes to mind. What is the direct versus indirect revenue of the company right now? Where do they want to get to? Is it 100% software revenue? Do they have a big services component? So if I want to bring in services partners, there could be conflict. So many things that I would look at.
And what about so you're in seat and now you're like they're like, hey, we want to have a strategic partnership with Salesforce and HubSpot. Like those are our two big bets, and probably AWS as well. But like that's why we're bringing you in, Jim, is to work on those. Like really, really important. Like what assessment are you doing to understand, hey, like, do we really have an opportunity here to stand out with Salesforce? And like, are we going to be one of those two partners that you described, where it's like, hey, we're going to go in the directory and the listing, or like, hey, we think that there's something uh, in addition to that that we can do with Salesforce?
Yeah, and not picking on either of those companies that you just mentioned, but I'll give you specifics related to both based on my experience. HubSpot growing. Scott Brinker's a legend over there. Um, do where would we fit? Do we have a product that truly is mid market? Or are we missing the mark one way or another? Is it a good fit that way? Do I trust my tech team to be able to build an integration? And everything on the back end that it takes. Um, those would be, I would say, my biggest upfront questions with that. I mean, the real answer is I either know people at every partner program or I know somebody who does that's pretty senior. Most of the time, I've got experience in the programs, and Salesforce is a great example of a rev share program. Do we have something that could be either one of those two metrics? We can sell it for a low price to 10,000 other customers, or are we way up market, more trophy hunting, but it aligns with, hey, is 80% of the customer base of the ISV use Salesforce for Sales Cloud? If some of those puzzle pieces fit together, I mean, there's a pretty good chance that the only variable is me being able to execute, and that's obviously something I wouldn't worry about. It just depends. Not that came out wrong, but you know where I'm going with that.
Hey, at least yeah, I mean, but understanding that's like less of a variable. Basically, it's a known.
It's a known variable. There you go.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I love that. And so yeah, like I'm really fascinated with these because I do think, hey, like I've built several successful partner programs like Optimizely, Amplitude, and Deal. We had like really good partner programs generating like material revenue and like like at a great scale. And yet still I knew, especially at Deal, and this is one of the reasons why I said, hey, like I think you could hire someone better than me. If I'm going to come and do something else, here is what I would recommend you hire next time. Was like a handful of strategic partnerships would make a world of difference to a company like Deal. But like the reality is like that just wasn't as much my strong suit. Whereas like building out like a scaled partner program like that performs really well, I can definitely do. You know, and so like I'm really interested to like for a strategic partnership like that, where it's like, hey, we're going to go and like we're going to go and try and build like a high six or maybe even seven figures partnership. So what are some of the key components of a strategic partnership, or the like critical things that people need to know and do when they're approaching stuff like that?
I don't know if I would call them critical components, but I think just recognizing that there's a pretty good chance that what your key partnership metrics are probably don't align 100% with Adobe or Salesforce or the Oracle partner team's metrics. And that's not a bad thing. That's just something that you need to realize. You can't pound rounds, round peg square hole type of situation. You've got to know how to work with the partner lead on the other side so both are hitting their metrics. And there may be some internal selling that you need to do to say, look, yes, we have to go through this step, or yes, we have to put it in such and such system, but here's why. And I find that if you just tell people the why, a lot of times it makes it a lot easier. I think that's a big component. And, honestly, I may have mentioned this earlier, just the situational awareness. You can't go in as a 25, 50, 70 million ARR ISV with one of the big guys and go in and call the shots. It's their partner program. It's not yours. You've got to know whether you're the great whale or whether you're the guppy. And I've been at some ISVs where sometimes the executive team, you're so proud of your own platform and what you've done to get something from idea to X in revenue that you expect on day one that a publicly traded company is going to think the same thing that you think, and it's taken you 5, 7, 10 years to get there. So it's a lot of bridging gaps. It's a lot of situational awareness. It's a lot of really good just foundation building. Without naming names, we've had a partnership where I'm at right now that is just a little over a year old. And I feel like we've gotten 2 years worth of work done in about 10, 12, 14 months. Um, some also believe that, some don't. But the fact is, the obviously the faster you can show tangible value, but a lot of times it is the better together story. Um, and being able to execute. You talk about components. I think of components as partner sales, partner enablement, partner marketing, anything product tech integrations. There's probably, if you looked at a hub and spoke, maybe there's 4 or 5 spokes there that, as a partner leader or partner manager over a strategic partnership, you want to make sure they're all firing on all cylinders. And if they're not all green, find out why. And honestly, again, without naming names, some of those are red or yellow because of somebody on the other side of the partnership that you can't control. Your tech partner lead, you kind of drew the short straw there, and you've got to work around that. Um, there's a lot of variables, but I think if you look at it from a functional area, maybe that's, you say component, I look at it as a functional area. How was partner recruitment? Did we get everything? Do we have the expectations of what the partner program is? Can we now execute? Do I have a good partner manager that's going to do 90-day QBRs with me? Do I fully understand their metrics? Do they understand mine? Can we coexist and make each other successful with it? So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
Did I really like that framework for like how you think about approaching a partnership, like breaking things down into the different functions and like, hey, monitoring the different, like what's the health of these different things, and like do we have context for these different functions? And I really 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 like that as a framework. I wish that me and you had had this conversation a little while ago, implemented some of that, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like we had loads of missing pieces on these bits and those bits. So I really really like that framework. Maybe we can work on something to like make that a bit of a template that people can use,
sure
because I
thing.
that'd be really helpful for people.
To me, it gets overwhelming otherwise if you
Yeah.
if you don't.
Well, this is the problem, right? It's like the playbook doesn't exist, and so like right now for most people, and so the reality is that everyone's just kind of figuring it out on these partner relationships. It's like you're kind of just like figuring out what's going to work, and when someone comes along with like a mental model like that, where it's like, hey, these are the different hub, this is the hub, these are the different spokes, and like you need to make sure that each of those is healthy and that you've got the right points of contact and you've got the right people on your team, you've got the right people on the bus basically for that thing to work. I feel like that's something that people could just take and be like, okay, now I don't have to run around like crazy. I can, this is the framework that I can use. And so I really, really like it. So yeah, let this is a conversation for another day, but I want to make sure that we get some sort of a template in people's hands so that they can use that. So a question for you, like jumping, because you have like some great experience working in some smaller like companies, also some great experience working in some really big companies. Oracle obviously is like a company that's known for partnerships. I think, like as if you think about like the big companies that have like notable partner programs and are like public about partnerships and have a structure and everything else, Oracle's definitely one of the ones that come to mind. So tell me a little bit about like the partnerships culture as much as you can at Oracle and how that differed to like some of the other companies that you've worked at.
I look back on it with fond memories. I think what their partner program looks like now versus when I was there, my point of view will be a little bit dated, more because of where their investments are now versus then. But I look back on it fondly because it felt like a startup inside a big company. I joined quickly after the Eloqua acquisition, and then they were bringing on Responses, Compendium, Maximizer, Blue Kai, uh, Data Logic. So they were building out a marketing cloud and a data cloud via acquisition all at the same time. So for somebody like me that doesn't do well with monotony, it was great because every 6 to 9 months it felt like there was a new acquisition, a new partner team that you had to bring in, a new approach to partners from each acquisition's product team. So that was great. I think what helped keep us honest is OPN, the Oracle Partner Network. I mean, they had pretty stringent, like this is what it is and this is what it isn't. Even though I'm managing technology partners in what was at the time the Oracle Marketing Cloud, you couldn't. There's a lot of things you couldn't deviate with. I mean, you could give that personal white glove treatment to, I want to say we had several hundred ISVs, but I spent a majority of my time with what I thought were the top 10, 15, 20. And that could be, some of them were technology partners, some of them were services partners, but just ones that could resonate with our reps, move the needle, from either from a services perspective or a better together story, um, ISV partner speaking.
Yeah, I love that, and I think we could spend a whole episode just talking about the setup there. So maybe we save that for another time because I want to ask you. You have you've worked at several different companies. You've worked at like companies with really established partnership programs like Oracle, and have been in several leadership roles. Like, so I'm interested to hear from you, having been like VP, GM, like multiple times at different organizations leading partnerships. What are some of the critical things that a VP of partnerships needs to be really aware of that maybe like a manager or a director of partnerships who there's less maybe scrutiny on or whatever else, like what does the VP of partnerships really need to make sure that they're doing at that executive level?
My answer would vary depending on what year you asked me. I would say in 2024, probably the single biggest thing for me is company culture. And that means a lot of things. And quick shout out to, Rainfocus, where I'm at now. Honestly, probably the best overall company culture of any place that I've ever worked. And folks are supportive, no negative energy, no finger pointing. There is a lot of just, we're in this together. If there's a challenge, we work together on how to figure it out. And when you bring that into the partnership space, it's everybody, people that I didn't expect to help make partnerships successful. I would say over the last, I've been there almost 2 years, has come out of the woodwork at one point in time to help make me slash partnerships successful. I think as a partnerships leader of any company of any size, as a leader, you're buffering maybe a lot of the challenges from your team. At least I do as a manager. That's how I've always approached it. And to me, if the culture is there, if the support of partnerships is there from the overall exec team, to me, any other challenges that you're facing are easier to overcome. I've also been at companies where the culture was not so positive. You're getting slacks at 4:30 in the morning, on a $2,000 partner deal that at the end of the day are irrelevant, but you've got a CEO that is breathing down the neck of the CRO, and the CRO takes the posture of the CEO a lot of times, and normally wouldn't take that posture. But yeah, again, just going back, the great company culture, I think, is the single biggest, at least in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
factor for success and happiness in a partnerships leader role.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, I hear you on that. And like, so say you're in a company that has a great culture, and you got the right stuff is there, right? And so you've done your diligence before you've joined this company, and you're in. Like, what's the like two or three things that you then as a VP of partnerships has to make sure that you're nailing internally?
Well, I would say prior to joining, confirming with the CFO, yes, I have budget. Yes, I have this for maybe a joint marketing fund, or I'm not going to get in. And this did happen to me where your team is X, but it needs to be X divided by two. And congrats, that's the first thing you're going to do when you
Yeah.
come in. Like again, talk about landmines. I feel like I've stepped on all of them. I just think if everybody understands at 100,000 foot view what the partner strategy is. So it's like the CEO telling the rest of the executive team, I'm bringing in this partnerships leader to do X, Y, and Z for our business. I think that helps because it does. If you do it after you're in, sometimes it looks like it's self-serving, or you're trying
Mhm.
to, you're trying to build a fiefdom, where in reality, I want to collaborate. I want to gain, everybody's acceptance and acknowledgement of here's what we're doing. But I think if it comes from the CEO on down, makes that piece a lot easier. And then I would say, just in general, knowing what the metrics are. And it could be, hey, if you're bringing me in to start XYZ program and it's pay to play, on day one, if we need to put in 250, 500,000, $1 million to be that top level partner because it's pay to play that you want, do we have it? And then
Yeah.
are you double and triple sure we have it? Like, I'm not going to come in and then you're miraculously not going to have the funds. Like, that's not a good situation for anybody. But again, fast forwarding, once you get in, really, much more so than just a 30, 60, 90-day plan, really going through more like 6, 12, 18, 24 months, all subject to change every quarter or so, depending on the progress. This is what this all looks like. And a lot of times you get in and you get the head of product or the CTO saying, hey, we can't move this fast. Okay, well, we need to get acknowledgement from the exec team that what I thought was going to take 6 months is going to take 9 or 12. And here's why. You always have business priorities that change. But just being in that conversation, to sum it up in one word, just communication. Here's
Mm.
my metrics. Here's my timeline. I don't like to sit on meetings, but if there's some that I think I'm getting something from other parts of the business that may be useful to me, that they may not think so on the surface, but it'll help me with partnerships, which again, where I'm at right now, no issues there, but have run into issues like that in the past at other places.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's so key. Like the communication. What I love is like you've obviously got again another mental model for the stuff that you need to get before you make a decision like this, which is really great. It's like it's like another template that we need to create. It's like
Sure.
Jim's criteria for joining a new company. So I absolutely love that you've got that in your head as well. But then once you've figured that stuff out, all of the communication is so key. Well, I know that people are going to love hearing this, and I'm so excited for them to do that. And I think if anyone takes away something from this session, it's like really nailing that communication you describe it, Jim. So helpful to understand a little bit of your perspective on these different key topics for executives in the industry. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me. Enjoyed the conversation.